And we are joined tonight by the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, with us. And, sir, it's good to have you back on the show. I want to start right there where we just left off. The socialist movement that seems to be, in a way, taking over the Democrat Party. Cost of living is fueling a lot of this, as you know, in this country. And despite a lot of positive economic news, there's still a feeling from a lot of people that things are too expensive. I think it's kind of fueling what we're seeing here. How do we get rid of that liability, before we vote again here in November? How do we ease that so this movement kind of dies out?
Rob, good to be with you. And look, this comes up all the time. We spent 45, 50 years fighting communism, the Soviet Union, which collapsed. Show me where it's ever worked before, whether it's the Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela. And these policies, you always end up with less. You always end up with less of what people want. And look, people should be upset. The Biden administration torched them. It was 21.5% unemployment, 4 or 5% loss of purchasing power. Wages didn't keep up. And for working Americans, I think the inflation level is probably 30 or 35% for things like autos, insurance, rent. And we've been trying to bring those down. Core inflation printed 2 days ago, 2.5%. It was a very good number, moving towards the Fed's 2%. The Iran conflict has given us a temporary spike in energy prices. We're going to get to the other side of this and come down. And what we've seen over the past year is that the bottom 25% of working Americans, their wages were up 5.5%. Overall wages were up above 4%. And look, 3.5% headline inflation. That's a real wage gain. It's not great, but a lot of times I tell people I feel like an emergency room doctor. The patient came in, he'd been backed over by a truck, and the first thing we had to do was stabilize the patient. And now we've applied the right medicine, and things are getting better slowly. And I think every week we are seeing real wage gains. Prices are coming down. The CPI numbers showed drug prices are down, grocery prices have flattened out, car insurance is down. So I'm very confident we are going to get to a good place. And it's unfortunate to see this DSA movement getting this kind of traction.
Yeah, it is. I just, you look back, if you look back at how it was for Reagan when he dealt with a very similar issue, it took so many years for that to kind of work its way through. I wonder if there's any indication that you guys see at Treasury of how long you think Americans will still feel kind of like they can barely keep up with this kind of inflated economy. How long do you think this lasts for the average American?
Well, again, Rob, what we're not going to do is tell Americans what they're feeling, like the Biden administration do. That they said it was a 5 session, and we know what has happened here. But I think as people feel the turn, which they should be now, then there is light at the end of the tunnel. Things are getting better. We're seeing construction jobs picking up. We're seeing manufacturing jobs picking up. The unemployment rate dropped. We are seeing the big component of the workforce, the mid-20s to mid-50s, is very stable. And Rob, the other important thing too is these jobs are going to Americans. Like, we have seen over 2 million jobs created for Americans, and we've seen over 1 million illegals leave the workforce. And guess what? The laws of supply and demand still work. When you take the illegals out of the workforce, working class wages go up. When you send them back home, rents go down.
Yeah, that's very true. The deportation process should be the one thing that can help kind of ease. Housing's been the worst. I mean, housing has just exploded. Nobody can afford a home. That's what's really crushing, I think, the spirit of the younger generation is you're 30 years old and you're renting. That's just not a good feeling. I want to move here for a second. I want to talk about Iran. You have been working behind the scenes in this war to dismantle this regime in Iran economically and inflict kind of heavy financial damage on it. The methods that Treasury has been using to do this in this war have been described as brilliant, from what I understand. The sanctions targeting their banking system and multiple networks spread out across several countries that enable Iran's banks to move hundreds of millions of dollars. You're limiting the ways that this regime can move money in ways it seems we haven't seen before. The president is calling this kind of low-keying it right now. We're not going to go back into bombs. We're going to let you try and dismantle this thing in a different way. Is that how you feel this war could end?
So, Rob, a year ago, last March of 25, the president gave me the order to apply maximum pressure to the Iranian regime, and Treasury did. And we've been going after, as you said, their bank accounts, crypto wallets, assets around the world, cutting off payments into both the leadership in the regime and the government itself. As a result, in December of last year, December of 2025, one of the largest banks, or the largest bank in Iran, collapsed. The central bank had to print money, created huge inflation. Then in March this year, or February, we started the kinetic war. The kinetic war ended after several weeks, and we went from epic fury to economic fury. And at the president's orders, we have raised the level even again. And watch this space for more announcements coming next week, because we are going to apply measures like have never been seen in the history of economic isolation on a country. And I think the reason we are succeeding is because it is a 1-2 punch. People say, well, Cuba lasted a long time, Venezuela lasted a long time. Venezuela immediately crumbled when we put the blockade on. So it will be a combination of economic isolation like the world has never seen before, and the continued blockade in the Strait of Hormuz that will keep anything from going in or out of the Iranian ports.
So when a Democrat says Iran's never been stronger, what's your reaction?
Then it's typical that they're uninformed, deranged, and have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. Two more quick ones for you before I let you go. I want to just hit the national debt, because it's something that I personally feel is very important. We're about to cross $40 trillion. I know how hard it is to cut government back once you go down a spending path. COVID took us to a place we've never been before. We're still kind of at that place. We're still spending about $2 trillion more a year than we bring in. Is there any way to get this under control?
Well, we did get it under control. We inherited a mess, about 6.8% deficit to GDP, which was the highest we'd ever seen when we weren't at war, weren't in a recession. And calendar year 2025, we actually brought it down to 5.5%. I've set a target of having something with a 3 in front of it as a percent of GDP to the deficit by when the president leaves, and then we start paying down debt at that point. So we got it down to 5.5% for calendar year 2025, and now this year we had to refund the tariffs, which have been about $170 billion. That's one time. We're going to continue taking in the tariff income this year. And then the other thing, too, to be cognizant of, in the working families tax cut, we had the immediate expensing for factories and the factory goods for equipment. And so that is a hit now to the deficit, but we are creating productive assets for future growth, which will be paying taxes all the way down the line. So I think of that more as like pulling back a slingshot and creating a lot of potential energy that becomes kinetic.
Yeah, it's such a difficult problem trying to get government spending under control and the size of government. You guys are doing it in a number of different ways. I love to see the job losses in the federal government coming out of that jobs report. I love to see that. I got about 30 seconds left. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's the job losses in the federal government, but it's also what President Trump has instructed us to do. Vice President Vance is leading the charge on the fraud task force. There are estimates by GAO that we've got over 500, 600 billion of fraud every year. And to put that in context, every 300 billion is 1% of GDP. So if we could save 300 billion, that would get the deficit down by 1% of GDP. I think there's more there. The vice president has all hands on deck. Every department is contributing. And the main thing there is once the money gets out, very difficult to retrieve it. So we are stopping it at the source, and I'm very optimistic that we could have several $100 billion of savings.
It's certainly a start, and I love to hear that. Trump accounts is my final question. It's a great idea. I think people love it. Treasury with new regulations this week on employer contributions. Can you tell us about this? I got about 30 seconds left. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Trump accounts, I think it's the most important social benefit for young people since the GI Bill. TrumpAccounts.gov. Everyone with a child 18 or under should go and sign up. For the 4 years of the president's term, Treasury is seating them with $1,000, and now we have made it so that employers can contribute up to $2,500 pre-tax, that it is not a taxable expense for families into these accounts. And I think it's going to become a great fringe benefit for employees.
Yeah. I love that. Love to hear that. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for coming on, for joining us. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, Rob.
You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmidt tonight on Newsmax.